Welcome to The Explainer. All right, let's just dive right into this, shall we? Today, we're walking through a comprehensive study guide on something that literally shapes the success or, the failure of every single organization on the planet. We're talking about managerial decision-making. I mean, think about top-tier leaders like Karen Lynch at CVS Health. She operates under this core belief that highly developed decision-making skills are absolutely critical to executing corporate strategies and actually adding real value. But how exactly do managers pull that off day in and day out? How do they process all that information, weigh the risks, and make the kind of choices that actually drive a business forward? Well, that is exactly what we're going to unpack today using the foundational concepts of organizational behavior. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the nature of decision-making, then compare programmed versus non-programmed choices, look at the classical model, contrast that with the administrative model, and finally, wrap up with the 6 decision steps. Okay, section 1, the nature of decision-making. So, at its core, decision-making is really the process by which managers respond to opportunities and threats. They do this by analyzing their options and making determinations about specific organizational goals and the best courses of action to get there. Notice those 2 key triggers I mentioned, opportunities and threats? Managers make decisions in response to opportunities when they see a chance to improve performance, to benefit customers, employees, or stakeholders. But conversely, they're making decisions in response to threats when things inside or outside the company are dragging down performance, and they've got to find ways to turn it around fast. Moving right along to section 2, programmed versus non-programmed choices. This is a huge distinction we need to make. On one side of the coin, we have programmed decisions. Think of these as your routine, virtually automatic choices. They pretty much run on autopilot because they've been made so many times before that managers have created established rules for them. Like, say a manufacturing supervisor has a strict rule. The second our existing workers' overtime hits 10%, we hire new people. Boom. The rule essentially makes the decision for them. But then, on the flip side, we have non-programmed decisions. These are the non-routine choices. The ones made in response to unusual, totally unpredictable opportunities or threats. There's no playbook here, no rules, because the situation is completely unexpected and managers just don't have the historical data to rely on. So, you're probably wondering, how do managers actually tackle those wild, non-programmed scenarios? Well, they generally lean on 2 main tools. The first is intuition. We're talking gut feelings, beliefs, those hunches that just pop into your head. It takes very little effort and results in a rapid, on-the-spot call. The second tool is reasoned judgment. Now, this is a much slower, way more deliberate process. It requires a lot of time and effort because you're carefully gathering info and generating all these different alternatives before picking one. Both are totally valid tools, but they obviously serve very, very different situational needs. Which brings us to section 3, the classical decision model. Now, the classical model is what we call highly prescriptive. It lays out exactly what a manager should do in a perfect world. It starts with listing out literally every single alternative course of action and what the consequences of each would be. Then the manager ranks them all and finally selects the one that leads to the best possible future. But listen, this model makes some absolutely massive assumptions. It assumes managers have access to all the information in the world. It assumes they have the unlimited mental capacity to process all of it. And maybe craziest of all, it assumes they know exactly which future outcome is objectively best for the organization. The whole goal of this classical model is to reach what's known as the optimum decision. This is basically the holy grail of management, the single most appropriate choice that will lead to the most desirable consequences for the company. It's the absolute perfect choice derived from absolutely perfect information. Let's move to section 4, the administrative decision model. Okay, let's get back to reality, because as we all know, we do not live in a perfect world. The administrative model completely flips the script. Instead of being prescriptive, it's descriptive. It explains why decision-making in the messy, chaotic real world is inherently risky and uncertain. And most importantly, it explains why managers almost always make satisfactory decisions rather than those perfect, optimum decisions we were just talking about. It basically accepts that the world is incredibly complex and just focuses on what managers actually do when their backs are against the wall. To really wrap our heads around the administrative model, there are 3 core concepts we need to look at: bounded rationality, incomplete information, and satisficing. Let's break these down one by one because they are absolutely crucial for this study guide. First up is bounded rationality. Honestly, this is just a giant reality check. It highlights the very real cognitive limitations that constrain our human ability to interpret, process, and act on information. Remember how the classical model assumes our brains are literal supercomputers? Well, bounded rationality reminds us that managers are just people. The sheer volume of data in today's business world is way too vast for any single human mind to perfectly evaluate. And because we aren't supercomputers, managers almost never have the full picture. There are a few very specific reasons for this. First, they deal with risk, which is the probability that certain outcomes will happen. I mean, think about the biotech industry, a staggering 90% failure rate for new drugs. That is a massive unknown you have to navigate. They also face ambiguous information that can be read a dozen different ways. And finally, they are dealing with crushing time constraints and the sheer cost of getting information. They literally don't have the time or the budget to hunt down every single alternative. Combine those three forces, and you are pretty much guaranteed that the information a manager uses is incomplete. And that leads us straight to our third concept, satisficing. Because of that bounded rationality and all that incomplete information, managers satisfice. This simply means they search for and choose a satisfactory response to a problem, rather than obsessing over finding the absolute best optimum decision. It's highly practical, it's looking at the real-world constraints, and choosing the option that works well enough to just keep the organization moving forward. Let's put this all together side by side, because locking in these differences is key here. The classical model, it's prescriptive, it aims for that optimum decision, and it blindly assumes you have complete information. The administrative model, that one is descriptive, it aims for a satisfactory decision, and it frankly acknowledges that you have incomplete information and bounded rationality. Understanding this stark contrast is absolutely foundational to mastering organizational behavior. All right, our final section, Section 5, the 6 decision steps. So, how do we actually put this into practice? This is your complete 6-step framework for making non-programmed decisions. It's essentially a roadmap for navigating those complex, unpredictable situations where you don't have any established rules to fall back on. Let's walk through how a manager gets from the first inkling of a problem all the way to learning from it. Okay, step 1, recognize the need for a decision. Usually this is sparked by some change in the environment. Step 2, managers have to generate a set of feasible alternative courses of action. In step 3, they assess those alternatives, bringing in whatever incomplete information they actually have. Step 4 is where they rank the options and make their choice. Step 5 is implementation. And finally, step 6 is learning from the feedback, looking back, comparing what actually happened to what you thought would happen, and using that to build better guidelines for the future. But I've got to point out a massive, massive pitfall right at step 5. Often a decision is made and not implemented. This is such a common trap. You can come up with the most brilliant alternatives, assess them flawlessly with reasoned judgment, and choose the perfect path. But if the choice is never actually put into action by the organization, all of that careful decision-making effort was literally for nothing.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a challenge. I want you to think back to a recent complex choice you had to make in your own life or career. Be honest, did you exhaust yourself trying to find an absolutely optimal outcome, like in the classical model, or did bounded rationality kick in? Did you assess the risks, look at your time constraints, and realize you just needed to satisfice? Because at the end of the day, understanding these frameworks isn't just about passing some management exam. It's about understanding how we all navigate the crazy uncertainty of the real world. Thanks for hanging out with me on The Explainer today, and hey, keep learning.